Welcome back, everyone. Today, we're going deep on something you probably don't think about much, but use every day: files.
Yeah, those little things that hold everything from your photos to those critical work documents,
Exactly. And we're talking C Sharp today specifically, how C Sharp handles these files.
especially in those apps we rely on, for business, for getting things done. They're all about file operations behind the scenes.
Right. Constantly reading, writing, moving files around. So, to guide our deep dive today, we've got a great article from Devstoc: Top 3 File Operations in C Sharp, published pretty recently, January 31st, 2025.
It's a great starting point, lays out the essentials, and we're going to add in how a tool called LINQ can make it all even smoother.
LA&Q, it sounds a bit like a Scandinavian furniture store,
Yeah.
but in the coding world, it's actually short for Language Integrated Query. Sounds fancy.
It is pretty cool.
Hmm.
Imagine like a super-powered search bar, but for your code. You need to find specific files. LINQ lets you do it with a few commands, almost like you're talking to the data directly.
So instead of writing tons of lines of code to find, say, all the PDFs in a folder, LAMQ lets you do it more efficiently.
Way more efficiently.
Yeah.
And the best part is LINQ isn't just for files. You can use it with all sorts of databases, arrays, even those XML files everyone loves.
So it's like learning one tool, but then having this superpower you can apply all over the place.
Exactly. And that's what makes it so valuable for developers.
Mm.
Okay, back to Devstoc and those top 3 operations. First up, listing files in a directory. Sounds pretty basic, but
It got to be the foundation, right? If you can't even see what files are there.
can't do anything else. It's like trying to bake a cake without knowing what ingredients you have.
Yeah.
Think of a photo app. Before it can show you those vacation pics, it needs to know what's actually in that pictures folder.
Makes sense. So how does C Sharp actually do this? There's no show me what's in this folder button.
Not a button, but almost that easy. C# has a built-in function, directory.getFilesPath. You just put the folder's location in those quotes, and boom, it gives you back a list of all the file paths.
Okay, so we get this list, but that's just file locations, right? Not very informative.
True. We could work with those raw paths, but C# offers something even better. File info objects.
Filer info.
Yeah.
Intrigue me. What are these objects all about?
So imagine you have a list of names. Helpful, but kind of basic. Now imagine you have a file for each person with their name, age, address, everything. That's what a file info object is like for files.
Ah, so it's like a full profile for each file. Way more useful than just knowing where it lives.
Exactly. And here's where LINQ steps in its select. Select method is the key. It lets you take that basic list of paths and transform it into a collection of those rich file info objects.
So we're not just seeing the file's name anymore, we're getting its whole backstory.
Exactly. And with all that info, we could do so much more.
Sure.
Which brings us to operation number 2, filtering those files. Imagine you need to find a specific PDF, but you're staring at a folder with hundreds of files.
Ugh, the digital equivalent of searching for a lost sock. Not fun.
No fun at all. But LINQ comes to the rescue again. This time, it's the where method. Let's say you only want those PDFs. You'd use where file.extension equals .pdf.
So we're basically saying, show me only the files where the extension is .pdf. Pretty straightforward.
Exactly. No more manual hunting. Just let LINQ do the heavy lifting.
And that's not just about PDFs. You can filter by anything in those file and info objects. Want images larger than a certain size? No problem. Only files modified last week. Done.
So it's really about having the power to get specific and having the code do the work for you. This is making file management seem way less scary.
It definitely is. And once we've narrowed down our files, there's one more core operation that really highlights how cool LAMQ is. Sorting.
Sorting. Okay,
Yeah.
now we're talking. I can see this being incredibly useful.
Yeah.
But I'm guessing we're not talking drag and drop here.
Nope, no manual sorting. Imagine you need the most recently edited document in a folder. With LINQ's order by method, you can sort by any file info property, like the last modified date, in just one line of code. Oh, wow, that's powerful. Instead of opening each file to check the date, I can just let LINQ arrange them neatly for me.
You got it. And it's not limited to dates, sort by size, name, whatever you need.
Okay, so we've got listing, filtering, and sorting, the file operation trifecta. And LIMQ seems to be the magic ingredient, making it all so smooth. I'm definitely ready to see some actual code now and see this LIMQ magic in action.
Let's do it.
Okay, let's dive into the code. I'm eager to see how all this comes together.
Well, the Devstoc article actually has a nice little code snippet for us.
Oh, perfect.
It shows how to grab those files, filter down to just the PDFs, sort them by last modified date, and then it displays the names. A good practical example.
Awesome. Walk me through it.
All right, so the first few lines we've got using system, using system.io, using system.link.
Okay, I know those using statements are like bringing in tools, right? So system.io is there because we're working with files and folders. I get that. And system.link, that's our LINQ superpower, right?
Exactly. And that plain old system, well, that's like the foundation of everything in C#. Basic functions, stuff you need almost every time. We need it here just to do things like, write output to the console so we can see what's happening.
Got it. Workspace prepped, what's next?
We have our main function. That's where the action happens. Inside, the first line is string files, directory, get files,
Yeah.
a C Devstoc directory. Remember how we talked about listing files earlier?
Yeah, that directory get files thing.
This is where it's put to work. We're grabbing all the file paths from that specific directory.
So we're telling the program where to look, but instead of just a jumble of file locations, we want to work with those fancy file info objects, right?
Exactly. And here comes LINQ. This next line, it's var file list equals file. So it looks a bit cryptic maybe, but it's actually pretty elegant. We're taking each raw file path and using LINQ select to turn it into a file info object.
So it's kind of like saying, hey, for every item in this list of file paths, make a file info object based on it.
You got it. Now we've got a collection of these file info objects, each packed with details about the file.
And that opens up all sorts of possibilities, like filtering, for example. Is that in the code snippet too?
Yep. It's all there. var PDF files, file list, or file.extension.pdf.order by file, bios file.lastWriteTime. We're chaining two LINQ methods together here.
Oh, wow. Okay. Break it down for me.
First, the where that's picking out only the files where the extension property is .pdf.
So we're snagging just the PDFs. I do like how readable that is. It almost feels like regular English.
Right. And then comes the order by. Remember how we talked about sorting? This is where we arrange those PDFs based on their last modified date using the last write time property.
Wow. So in one line, we've listed the files, grabbed just the PDFs, and put them in chronological order. That's pretty impressive, but so far it's all been behind the scenes, right? What happens next?
The rest of the snippet is a loop that goes through each PDF and prints its name to the console. It's a way to see the results of our work.
Right. But in a real app, you do more with those PDFs than just display their names, right?
Oh, for sure. You can open them, move them, analyze the content.
Yeah.
The point is, LINQ has done the heavy lifting to get the right files in the right order.
That makes sense. But, the transcript critique mentioned something about error handling. Is that important here?
It's a really good point. You're right. When we're working with files, things can go wrong. A file might not exist. Maybe you don't have permission to access it. All sorts of things can happen.
So how do we make sure our code doesn't just completely crash if something unexpected comes up?
Well, C# has ways to deal with those situations gracefully, using what are called exceptions. We could wrap our file operations in something called a try-catch block.
Can you give me an example of how that might look?
Yeah, we could wrap our code like this. Try our existing file operations code goes here, exception X, console.writeLine, and error occurred plus X.message.
Okay, so if something goes wrong, instead of crashing, the program will print out a message explaining the error.
Exactly. And we can then decide what to do next. So even though our example keeps things simple, in a real-world app, error handling would be essential to make it more robust.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like having a safety net for your code. So we've seen how LINQ simplifies things, and we've talked about error handling. It feels like we're getting a good grasp on working with files in C#.
We are, but there's another layer I think is worth talking about. The why behind LINQ. Why use it instead of those more traditional methods?
Yeah, that's a good question. We've seen that it can make our code shorter and cleaner, but is there something more to it than that?
It's not just about less code, it's about better code. Code that's easier to read, easier to understand, and less likely to have errors.
Okay, I like the sound of that.
With LINQ, you focus on what you want to achieve,
Yeah.
not the nitty-gritty details of how to do it. It's like the difference between writing a detailed recipe for a cake versus using a cake mix. Both get you a cake, but the mix is way simpler.
Right. Love that analogy. And LINQ really is making files in C# seem a lot less intimidating than I thought.
It's the power of a good tool. And speaking of tools, remember those file info objects? They've got even more to offer than we've talked about.
Oh, right. We mentioned size, creation date, but I bet there's even more hiding in there, isn't there?
You bet. Like creation time to see exactly when the file was born. Full name gives you the whole path, no shortcuts. Is read-only that tells you if you're allowed to change the file. And with LINQ, all this becomes even more powerful for filtering and sorting.
So I could filter for files created before a certain date, or maybe group them by whether they're read-only or not.
You got it. And that's just scratching the surface. File info is like a treasure chest waiting to be explored.
This is making me want to dive into the documentation for file info and LINQ. It's like the more you know, the more you can do.
Exactly. And before we wrap up, one thing I think is really important. LINQ isn't just a C# thing.
Oh, interesting. Tell me more.
A lot of languages have similar ideas, like streams in Java or list comprehensions in Python. These principles, filtering, sorting, transforming, they're all over the place.
So it's not just about memorizing the specific C-sharp way of doing it. It's about understanding these core ideas that apply across different languages.
Exactly. Learning to think in terms of data streams, how to manipulate them, that's going to make you a more adaptable programmer no matter what language you're using.
That's a great takeaway. It's like learning a new way of thinking, not just a new set of commands.
Precisely. And, before we move on, I do want to leave our listeners with one final thought, a little something to ponder.
All right, lay it on us. What's the big question we should be thinking about?
So we've seen how awesome LINQ is for dealing with files in C#. But what about other situations? Could you use these same LINQ ideas, the filtering, sorting, all that, to simplify other parts of your C# code, or even in other programming languages altogether?
Ooh, that's a good challenge. It's like we've unlocked this new way of thinking about data. We've been talking about files, but those same concepts could apply to, I don't know, a database of customer info or even just like a list of products on a website.
Exactly. Imagine a huge online store, thousands of products. You could use LINQ style thinking to filter products by category, sort by price, maybe even build those personalized recommendations based on what a customer has bought before.
And it's not just online stores, right? Any app that deals with a bunch of data could benefit. You could use this to analyze, I don't know, sensor readings, process financial transactions, even stuff like managing scientific simulations.
Oh yeah, for sure. The possibilities are huge. The key is recognizing that these core ideas, this way of manipulating data, it's fundamental to programming. Once you get those, you can apply them anywhere, no matter what specific area you're working in.
It's like we learned a whole new language, the language of data manipulation. And now we can use that language to express our programming ideas more clearly, more efficiently.
Exactly. It's about elevating your thinking, not just individual lines of code, but thinking about the bigger picture, how data flows, how you transform it.
This has been such a cool deep dive. We started with something kind of simple, C# and files, but we've ended up with a whole new perspective on how to think about data in programming.
And that's the fun part of learning, right? You start in one place, but the journey takes you somewhere unexpected with these bigger connections.
It's like we've found these secret tunnels connecting all these different parts of programming, and LINQ is the key. It helps us navigate this complex world more elegantly.
I love that analogy. It really captures that sense of exploration and discovery when you master a new tool.
And speaking of exploring further, the Devstoc article has a further reading section with links to the official documentation on LINQ and file info. Definitely worth checking out if you want to go deeper.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Those docs are like a goldmine of information.
Well, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive. We've covered a lot, from the nuts and bolts of C# file operations to the bigger picture of how to work with data.
Hopefully everyone listening has enjoyed the journey.
And I hope they've come away with a new appreciation for LINQ and how it can make their code more powerful and elegant.
So until next time, everyone, keep coding, keep exploring, keep diving deep. You never know what you might discover.
Well said. And remember, sometimes the journey of 1,000 lines of beautiful code starts with just one well-crafted LINQ query.